So the topic of dementia is important. As volunteers and or administrators of volunteers, our work allows us to connect with people of all ages, not just our clients, but volunteers, workers, and their families. Dementia is not just an old-timer's disease. It's a condition that affects all of us at one time or another, perhaps within our families, work, communities, and or connections. Knowing how to shift our focus with knowledge, compassion, and grace, we can journey with one another to provide ongoing care and support. Our presenter, Karen Holloway, has been a volunteer and advocate for the elderly since she was a child. She achieved experience and education over many years in law, healthcare, and the culinary arts. She moved from Seattle to Saskatchewan in 2004 after falling in love at a centennial dance in Wapella. Karen left her career as executive chef and food service manager at Marriott Senior Living Home, Brighton Gardens in Bellevue, Washington. Within her positions and work with the Marriott, she benefited from many years of ongoing education, travel, and networking opportunities. Once settled in Saskatchewan, with her combined work and volunteer experience within long-term care environments, Karen was thrilled to get her foot in the door with the Saskatchewan Health Authority, working in the Moosomin and Whitewood recreation programs. She was asked by her manager to become a gentle persuasive approach coach and has been providing this training over the last 10 years. Karen excitedly accepted a permanent position as a volunteer and health promotion coordinator. She felt this would be a good fit for her to mentor others as a health educator. Karen continues to do relief work and recreation and is enjoying her new role within volunteer services as a coordinator, networking volunteers, colleagues, and other stakeholders. Karen, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Jenica. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome again. Thank you for taking the time to join us and learn some philosophies, tools, etc., to assist you in your relationship with persons with dementia. We have some great resources. The Alzheimer Society handout, which you received earlier. Thank you, Christine, for sending that forward. Shifting Focus. This is the full version guide of that guide. And you'll be able to print that off. If you want to print that off ahead and write notes, that's what I like to do when I'm in workshops. There's also other materials through the Alzheimer Society. I encourage you to go online and see those resources. I'm also going to draw on my experience as a child volunteer, as Jenica mentioned, my work in senior care. I was a bluebird campfire girl. We would go to nursing homes and sing. I don't sing well, but they received well. As a food service manager in Marriott Senior Living Services, I was able to attend, as Jenica mentioned, so many different workshops, foundations of leadership, empathy training, etc. My role as a GPA facilitator, which stands for Gentle Persuasive Approach. It's a program by AGE, the Advanced Gerontological Education. It's about personhood, people, protection, practices, and progress. All employees in long-term care in all positions in the SHA take that training, the Gentle Persuasive Approach in dementia care. The overall goal of GPA is to use person-centered, compassionate, and gentle persuasive approaches. We respond respectfully with confidence and skill to behaviors associated with dementia. The objectives of GPA are to understand that a person with dementia is a unique human being capable of interacting with the outside world, to explain the relationship between the disease process and the person's behavioral response, to apply emotional, environmental, interpersonal, and communication strategies to prevent and diffuse responsive behaviors, and to demonstrate suitable and respectful self-protection techniques to use in a situation of risk. The Alzheimer's Society guide we have provided is called Shifting Focus, a guide to understanding dementia behavior. That's what inspired me to write the following piece for you, and it's a journey in a car wash. In the back seat. Shifting Focus, how well named this guide is. I close my empathic eyes and look into the blurry view of this journey. And I think of a lonely, frightening ride in an unfamiliar car going through a car wash. Just imagine, in this right here, right now moment, you find yourself seated somewhere, perhaps in a wheelchair, and suddenly something feels like it has grabbed you from behind. You are moving, but not by your own power or decisions. Keep your eyes closed and imagine yourself right now in the backseat of a car, in a car wash. Everything becomes darker. Sounds are different, coming from unknown sources. The pace is uncertain. You may feel jarred, pulled, pushed, isolated, encased, and alone. Your vision is blurred. It becomes darker. The jets, the brushes, the sounds, the temperature changes. You feel a cold draft. That atmosphere changes. The air is unfamiliar. There is a sense of almost falling, but you're still sitting. You don't know where you're going or how long it will take. You're not in control. Our elders have been driving for a long time. They blazed the trails, built the bridges, tended the home fires, and created realities from their visions. Life's golden age rides should not feel like the ride in the backseat of a car wash. Someday we may be in this situation, not in the driver's seat. Some of our loved ones have already been there. Maybe you help them understand, or just know that you are there. They are not alone, and you can reassure them on this journey. With eyes of empaths, ears that hear, mouths of kindness, and hearts that care, we can be there. We are shifting our focus to the one who is on this journey. As you may gather, I love words. I've written poetry since I was a child. The rhythm of poetry, music, nature, and the environment are the soundtracks of life for most of us. How can we help orchestrate that rhythm for our elders? We're sharing these resources, and I'm happy to, because they've helped me along the journey, as well as just a natural empathy that I've had for elders. GPA is all about personhood. Tom Kitwood, a clinician in England and researcher, coined this phrase. He had a passionate interest in the quality of care for persons with dementia and provided the foundation for much of the evidence that guides a philosophy in care settings today. He defines personhood as involving support, respect, and trust given from one person to another in a caring relationship. There is a difference between a person and their disease. How do we know which part of the behavior is the person and which part is related to the disease process? It is vitally important to not lose sight of who the person is inside. People with dementia are people first, with many remaining streaks. They are still capable of feeling and expressions and expressing emotion very deeply. I'd like now for us to turn our attention to the presentation, Shifting Focus, given to us by the Alzheimer's Society. Thank you. Christine is going to help me shift the pages because I'm set up in kind of an awkward situation here, and I want to remain focused on the camera. So, Christine, if you could move ahead. Again, this is something you can print off for yourself. This is the table of contents. As I mentioned earlier, this is the longer version. There's also a shorter version that's about 12 pages long. Next page. The terminology. Thank you. The terminology that's used here, he, she, husband, wife, father. So as we talk about different people with dementia, we'll use those different references. Dementia is a general term that refers to many different types of diseases, including Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, mixed dementia, and others. Different types of dementia are caused by different physical changes to the brain. Some dementias are reversible, meaning that they can be treated and cured. Some are irreversible, meaning that there is no cure at all. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, 64% of all dementia in Canada. Alzheimer's disease causes a gradual, slow onset of memory loss and a continuing decline. There are also changes in judgment and reasoning, and performing everyday tasks becomes harder. Next slide, please. When you're diagnosed with dementia, you become a member of a club. Challenging situations. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just going to touch on this again. You have your own copy. We want to remember these are suggestions. Our goal is to give you tools to improve the relationship with your family member, friend, whoever you're interacting with. Sometimes it can be people that we work with, our other volunteers. It could be people within your family, people within your church, just a number of things. So just keep in mind that the more compassionate we are, the more empathetic and the better listeners are, the better we can help people on this journey. So people are no different. People with dementia are no different than the rest of us. We all have those needs. And just know that it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means their context or their vision or perception is different. Next slide, please. When we think about dementia, we think about where it ends up in the brain. There are different parts of the brain that have different strengths and responsibilities, the limbic system. And you can look on this diagram and see where these are located. Again, the type of dementia can affect the different types of behavior. Initially it was called, when it was really aggressive, we call it aggressive behavior. And then we kept changing it to, and now it's responsive behavior. And we've even gone another step further with GPA, calling it expressive behavior. You'll find those words interchangeably because of the different training we have and many different programs that are available as well. The limbic system affects early in Alzheimer's disease. It's involved with memory and emotion. It links the lobes of the brain, enabling them to connect behavior with memories. It controls emotion and basic needs, such as sleeping and eating. The hippocampus and temporal lobes. The hippocampus processes verbal and visual memory. Verbal memory relates to what we read, say, or hear. Visual memory lets us recognize objects, faces, and places to guide us around our environment. Temporal lobes control new learning and short-term memory. The parietal lobes help us sequence actions, such as getting dressed in the right order or starting driving a car. I'd like to say when I'm teaching GPA, when we talk about the cues, the verbal cues we give our residents, come on, let's hurry up, put your shoes and socks on. If we were to actually follow that order, how hard would it be to get our socks over our shoes? I mean, I really think of those things. Next slide, please. Frontal lobe initiates activity and lets us plan and organize our actions. It regulates social judgment and behavior, such as knowing appropriate behavior for a situation, interpreting others' feelings, and monitoring our actions. Occipital lobe controls vision and the ability to see and combine colors, shapes, angles, and movements into meaningful patterns. What happens to the brain with dementia? There can be a loss of language. They may lose their ability to speak and comprehend language. Care partners often will fill in blanks. Loss of recognition. I remember going into my grandmother's room in the hospital when I was in high school, and she said, "Karen, all the way from Norway." I thought, wow, I've never been there. I know a lot more now. I must have, I don't know, reminded her of somebody. I didn't push her on it, though. I was gracious. Loss of purposeful movement. The person with dementia will lose the ability to plan, sequence, and execute the steps of a particular task. For example, as I said, when getting dressed. They may have no knowledge of your disease. You don't know what you don't know. She's not in denial. She believes she has the same abilities as she always has, like my grandma. She lacks the insight to know she needs help and is more likely to resist care. That's why we teach the gentle persuasive approach. Loss of perceptual acuity. Your family member can experience hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there, or more often illusion, misperception in what they see. For example, clothes on a hook may look like a person, particularly when shadows from late afternoon or early evening. There's this famous story about a man in a care home. He used to go down the hallway, and it would be when the sun was just setting on the floor, and he'd go back and forth in the hallway. And it was determined he'd been a hockey player and he was checking. Loss of initiative. When often mistaken for being lazy or sleepy, loss of initiative is common and begins early. She may lose interest in participating in activities. For example, she may sit all day in silence with her chin on her chest, but if approached, she may make eye contact and smile. Loss of memory. Your fellow residents, if you're in a nursing home, and again, this guide is for families, it's for coworkers, it's for residents who don't understand how to interact with residents who have advanced dementia. Fellow resident may be losing short-term memory, sensory memory, long-term memory, habitual memory, and unconscious memory, and has no control over this at all. Awareness of her loss will vary day to day and moment to moment. Next slide, thank you. Again, responsive behaviors, and we are now upgrading it to expressive behaviors. What are they and why do they happen? Responsive expressive behaviors is a term preferred by persons with dementia, representing how their actions, words, and gestures are a response, often intentionally, that express something important about their personal, social, or physical environment. They can be the result of changes in the brain, affecting memory, judgment, orientation, mood, and behavior. They can follow these principles of their expressions, words, gestures, and actions. They have meaning. Personal expressions communicate meanings, needs, and concerns. And to understand their meaning, you must consider the factors influencing this behavior: physical, emotional, environmental elements. We heard another story in our training about someone who was fearful of the bath, very, very fearful to be lowered into the bathtub. Well, apparently this individual had nearly drowned once before. So from then on, there were showers. It's not as easy to shower somebody in a wheelchair or in a particular chair, but we make those efforts in long-term care because that's what we do to meet the needs of our clients. Moving on, the guide offers other strategies in physical, intellectual, emotional, the capabilities, the environment, the social. So are we meeting somebody's needs? Have they experienced recent changes in memory? Have you noticed tearfulness or anxiety? Sometimes things will set that off. Sometimes a sudden memory or reference to somebody being gone. Many, many years ago, it was reality orientation. And when a resident would cry out, "Where's Ralph? Where's my husband?" The practice was, "Ralph is dead." Well, we don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. We just try to do a practice we call redirect. And in redirecting people, what we do is we bring their attention to something else to keep them out of that pit of fear, panic, or knowledge they're not able to absorb. Environments, again, we talked about the sun coming in. Sometimes things are placed over a mirror so that people are not alarmed by who they see looking at them. Social, sometimes people have different experiences and we know insights from that. Another story about a resident who would respond every time pills were cracked at the med station. And we realized she'd been a survivor of war. These are things that we need to know. And when we welcome a resident to long-term care, we get a little bit of a history. The families help us with that. If we know these things, we can anticipate potential reactions to certain noises or experiences. Next slide, please. So the responsive behavior philosophy needs to be understood. We need to know the meaning of their personal expression. Understand the layer of nature of these expressions, including the individual level, the subjective experience of the physical body, cognition, emotional experiences, spirituality, and cultural beliefs. That's another thing that's really important and is taken into consideration when someone is welcomed to a care home. We want to develop skills in active listening, be truly present, and communicate using alternative words. Be open, non-judgmental, and compassionate, and understand the person with dementia and his or her experiences, the meaning of personal expressions, and how best to offer. At this point, I'd like to talk about something I do when I present GPA, and that's being aware of what our energy is. When we enter into somebody's room or somebody's space, our energy is coming forward into their energy. And if you imagine that as almost a smoke or a cloud, and they may be different colors, and how they intermix, it's really important that we don't dominate with our energy, that we go in with positive body, open, approachable body language. We want to come in respecting their space and having them aware of ours at a timely pace. The impact of responsive behavior can have effect on caregivers as well as family, friends, and co-residents. So if we approach with this type of energy, we can make a big difference and hopefully avoid frustration and panic or feelings of being overwhelmed by our clients. Next slide, please. Again, before I forget, don't forget to use your long-term care, family council, etc. There are resources for that if you're involved in that. The specific kinds of responsive behavior, restlessness or agitation, pacing, sexual behaviors, there are things physiologically that can actually have an effect on a person's body that trigger that effect. I would talk to the nurse in home care. If you're a volunteer with home care, Meals on Wheels volunteers, something like that. If you need a little bit more information, we do have resources that can be shared with you. Sundowning. When the sun goes down, there seems to be, it's sort of like cocktail hour without the cocktails. There's a shift in energies for some. Unwarranted requests or calls out for attention for help. Remember, you don't remember what you don't remember. If a resident is feeling panicked and alone, they're going to call out for help. If no one comes, they're going to call out for help. If someone comes and goes away, they don't remember and they're going to call out for help. So there are things that we can do that can calm that environment. Maybe it's favorite music. Maybe it's doing a foot rub. How helpful that is. Sometimes our residents have foot cramps. It breaks my heart to see that. I can't imagine not being able to jump out of bed and stand on a cold floor. So be mindful of those things. Outbursts of anger, that's frustration. Cursing or verbal aggression, seeing things that aren't there, paranoia, screaming, complaining or whining, grabbing onto people, and difficulty saying goodbye. Next slide, please. This goes on to further discuss agitation and some of these other situations that we can look at. There's strategies in here. Let's look at this one specifically. Possible triggers or causes: environmental, such as changes in living arrangements or in caregivers. Fear of bathing, we touched on. Unknown surrounding or having clothes changed. Dehydration, fatigue, feeling overwhelmed or confused. Our strategies, mentioned before: redirect a person's attention, remain calm and positive. Use visual and verbal clues. Sometimes that means gestures. Do you want to sleep? Whenever possible, give him options, but offer one or two choices to avoid overwhelming him. You're like the waiters of the 80s in the Fern restaurants where, hi, my name is Sparky. Would you like this, that, or the other thing? And by the time they get to the end of the menu, I mean, even when I was young, I couldn't really retain all of it. Don't overwhelm with too many choices. An example of that could be, do you want to wear the blue shirt or the red shirt, or what pants do you want to wear? Hold up the blue shirt, hold up the red shirt. It does take longer in the beginning, but it shortens the experience in the end, and it supports our residents. Let's go ahead and go into the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, Christine, if you could come back, I love this. He is not the problem. He has a problem. Remember, they are not the disease. They are a person with the disease. Thank you. Next slide. Wandering is something that can happen. And sometimes it's really just best to let somebody wander. If somebody is in the care home, there's a space and a place to wander, and there's trained staff around to help with that. If you're caring for somebody at home, it may be more difficult for a space to wander, especially in our Saskatchewan weather, going outside, etc. So find little pathways, maybe rearrange some furniture. If your wife has dementia, maybe make sure there's a quick path to the kitchen, quick path to the bathroom, meeting the needs, and removing obstacles. Triggers that can cause this can be stress and anxiety, inability to recognize people, places, or objects, a desire to fulfill former obligations. I've got to let the cat out. The cat ran away 20 years ago, but we can go check. No, the cat's not there. We'll check later. Boredom. How do people stay engaged? How do they feel useful? Searching for something familiar. Her need to find the bathroom. And that's an ongoing issue because it's sense of urgency, smaller bladders, bladder problems, etc. So we don't say, you don't need to go in your diaper. We respect, we respond. We can try to redirect, but don't eliminate that need. Don't disregard it. Strategies: encouraging movement and exercise to reduce anxiety. That may be you start working on Tai Chi together, maintain regular routines, remove visual reminders, etc. We are at 11 o'clock now. We have another half an hour. I'd like to go through some of these quickly go through these and see if we have any questions. Sexual behaviors, again, I sort of addressed that earlier. There's more information there. These are more examples of that. Sundowning, we discussed that already. We covered that when the sun goes down and it's not cocktail hour. Go ahead. Repetition, and again, you don't remember what you don't remember. Distract with activities, etc. Respond to the emotion behind the question. Next slide, please. Anger or aggression. Again, think about that energy that you bring into their presence. Think about how welcoming, loving, gentle you are. Strategies. In the care home, we have all sorts of supports. If you're caring for somebody at home, you don't always have those supports. Try to find some backup. Look for these resources. Again, I can't stress enough how much Alzheimer's Society has in terms of resources and support. Next slide, please. Hallucinations and paranoia. And that can be a lot more complicated. It can have to do with, when we talk about bladder infections, sometimes fevers, etc., urinary tract infections that can kind of mask itself. So we really need to get clear assessment of what that situation is. Next slide, please. Strategies to enhance communication for people living with dementia. So again, introducing yourself, having a gentle approach, use humor, use visual cues. Sometimes you're going to sing. We had a resident who wouldn't come to breakfast until we filled his mug and we sang "You Are My Sunshine" and walked him into the dining room. It was wonderful. It lifted everyone's spirits. See what works for them. More solutions here. And again, approach your resources to follow up. Next slide, please. The "I want to go home." You know what? Validate it. There's a lot of cues and clues and words within the GPA. We want to validate. We want to join in. Validate their experience. Don't poo-poo it. Oh no, you don't need to go. You don't need to go to the store now. We have this. Oh, I understand your need. We don't. What can I find for you here? Come up with solutions and remember the all famous redirect. And that doesn't mean squirrel. It means having a really sincere, good sidestep. Next slide, please. create a meaningful visit. I can't stress this enough. During the height of pandemic, we had people waving to their loved ones through windows, using iPads. I mean, how great we have this technology. It can help us, but it's not the same as feeling the energy. So, it's so important that those visits are meaningful. If you come in to visit a resident, especially our volunteers, you want to connect with a recreation coordinator. If you're in long-term care, if you're visiting somebody in acute care, connect with the nurse there, ask how things are going, etc. There's so many suggestions here. Next slide, please. Saying goodbye after a visit. It can be very, very hard to say goodbye. One of the ways to do that is to sincerely make a plan to come back another time or to connect another time, to perhaps enlist the help if you're in the care home with a care aide to come and do a little redirecting. It's really smart to plan your visits right before a meal time or, with the staff, some support and knowledge, when is a good time to exit stage left or to have a gracious exit. Next slide, please. You have a role as a care partner in long-term care, either as a family member, as a volunteer, as a worker, and that is so important. We have the family council meetings, family resident council meetings. Staff is always willing to lend a shoulder and lend an ear. So don't be afraid to ask for that support. And then if you need further support, go to the nurse in the unit, talk to the manager, talk to the patient care coordinator. We have a wealth of experience and knowledge within SHA care facilities, as well as many others around the area. Next slide, please. Communicating and working with the staff, I touched on that already. Please let them know how the visit went in brief. They may want to chart that if there's been a big difference. Discussing difficult situations, again, you may want to make a scheduled time to talk with them on the phone or meet with them if they don't have time at that time, but make sure you reach out. Next slide. Converting ideas into action, again, with the care staff. We're able to help with that. Next slide, please. And final words before we go to questions. Who better to provide an into this guide than those with dementia? With their voices, maybe no longer heard, their words can live on. Please don't say things like, don't correct them. Listen to them. Hear what they're saying. Listen between the lines. These are the things that we have heard from them, either when they could speak it or when their families could interpret it. Remember, my feelings are intact. That is so important. Sometimes I think we look at people like situations, and we need to not do that. It's very important. Again, these are really, really great thoughts from our elders. Next slide, please. I think we're at the end. Oh, I'm sorry, back up to that last one. You do not need to be perfect to be loved. That's from Alice Walker. Thank you. And again, more resources. Don't hesitate to look for these resources. Also, if you want to contact me at my email, karen.holloway@saskhealthauthority.ca, if you have some specific questions. I may not be able to get back to you right away, but I am very interested in supporting you, as well as all of our volunteer coordinators and our long-term care staff. Do we have many questions, Jenica?
I've been keeping an eye on the chat and I don't see any in there currently.
Okay. All right.
If people have any now, that they'd be free, they can, use their hand gesture there and we can.
Okay. And then Christine, do you mind putting my email address out there for them as well?
I'm working on that here.
Thanks so much. It's keep in mind that the the GPA program that we do is a full day training, mandatory training for staff with a recharge every 2 years. So we have resources available with that, and they're wonderful resources. There are other programs too. Other groups are experiencing or experimenting with new programs. So there's a lot of learning that's available out there. I can't stress enough how important the Alzheimer's Society is. Again, back to GPA and the program, as I mentioned, it's mandatory for all employees who are in long-term care. But again, there are other programs as well. If you, certainly have had good experience with them, I'd love to hear about it. And feel free, as I said, to send me any questions. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope it's met what your expectation was. I know we have people on board. I'm curious how many different organizations or other volunteers we have who are here, or I know we have the Alzheimer's support group, some representation from Mooseman. What a great job they're doing here. So it's really together as a community that we share resources and experiences.
We do have a question in the chat. We're just wondering if a person with dementia wants to volunteer with our program, what questions should we ask to make sure we are aware of their needs and able to make appropriate accommodations?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think, is the person applying on their own? Is there a spouse or a family member? Maybe asking if there are any factors that they're uncomfortable with or cause fear or expressive behavior. It's probably not to that point, but just be mindful of that. What is their stamina? Is sitting through bingo just about all they really can keep focused on or they have interest in? So finding out from them or from their family member, caregiver, what their capacity is, and meeting that. We want our volunteers to volunteer in areas that they have joy and connection in. It's finding the right person for the right job. It is a job being a volunteer, but it's also a service. So we want to be respectful of that and make sure it's the right balance.
Thank you, Karen.
You're
So
welcome.
if a long-time volunteer starts to show signs of dementia, how should we approach a conversation with them about their needs and how to keep them safe?
Privately, with empathy, eye contact, and enough time to let them unfold what's going on. Use your instincts, use your energy. Sometimes we run into situations where there are people we know, they may even be relatives, and it's like, oh no, what do I do here? Well, you do what you'd want somebody to do for you. Listen, be empathetic, have open energy, and sift through it. Sifting is such a great word. I love that expression. There's an old saying that a friend is somebody who can sift through all of your problems and with a breath of kindness, blow them all away like sand in your hands. I love that. Take the time to sift through and find out what would work for them.
We have a participant, she's just sharing that she has a family member that's an active volunteer at the age of 94, wow. And she's experiencing some memory loss. She's been volunteering at the senior center for 8 years, but it's coming to a place where she may need some support. Do you have any comments or suggestions for people at the facility or even for family?
Yes, so thank you for that question. That is, and we'll see that more and more. You'll see me here in a few years, and I hope somebody else is accompanying me on that way. First of all, let the recreation coordinator know that this is going on. Discuss with he or she. Perhaps provide a ride with them, accompany them. Perhaps another friend, volunteer can come with them. if this person begins to exhibit some expressive behaviors that you're not comfortable with, or the care home isn't comfortable with, or your family member isn't comfortable with, then really look to some other solutions. And it may be that it's just a short time in a group. We certainly have group activities where they can participate, hymn sing, things like that, church services, but just make the staff, let them be aware of this situation, and don't forget to keep in touch and kind of monitor together that progress. You're a great advocate for your family member if you want them to continue to volunteer and you want to support that. So thank you. Just work with the professionals within the facility, and again, don't hesitate to look to the Alzheimer's Society, or to even talk with your loved one's doctor, or caregivers if they have home care, etc. We just need to continue to watch their progress. Remember, we didn't put them in the car wash. We're not the ones that put them there. The disease did. And we can just make sure that their rides in the car are open windowed, and not traumatic. They maybe can't drive, but they can enjoy the ride if you're piloting it responsibly for them.
It seems that the family is supportive of her volunteering, and also the care home staff. And it sounds like there's been some recommendations that her grandmother have a possible, get a supporter for herself to do some volunteering. So it might be some brainstorming on behalf of what does that look like? Is there another volunteer that they could, buddy up and pair up perhaps? What else would you maybe suggest, Karen?
Well, I think that's the best suggestion. Again, it's essential that you let the recreation coordinator know this is going on, or the patient care coordinator. It depends on, I'm speaking with an SHA, and I know what our staffing and our process is. You could talk to somebody on the floor, but my suggestion, if it's really looking for a solution, that you look to somebody in a leadership role who can carry it forward, to huddles, to conversation, etc. You don't want to just hand it off like a frisbee on your way out. Not that you would, but I'm just saying sometimes it feels like that. We're wanting to express this concern. We want a solution. We're reaching out, and we don't know where it goes from there. An email, so you have a link to that communication, is another great idea. Remember the patient family council opportunities again. So the manager, the patient care coordinator, the recreation coordinator, these are people in leadership roles that can share that forward. And if there is a good friend who volunteers along with them, check in with them from time to time. They may be too gracious or feel too responsible to maybe say, I can't do that every Tuesday. I can't do that all the time. So just maintain the communication through all the connections. Think of everyone around your family member is also their circle of care. We all have circles of care. Our patients, our clients have circles of care, from housekeepers to dietary aides, to visitors coming in, to maintenance, to all the care staff around them. That's a circle of care. The family is part of the circle of care, and they intertwine constantly. Years ago in our palliative care group, we did a whole presentation about the circle of care. It's really important that we all know we're part of that. Looks like we have other comments.
Just inquiring about your email address. So we've got the correct email address in the chat now.
Okay, and so I'll just confirm it's Karen, lowercase Karen, Holloway, HOLLOWAY, at saskhealthauthority.ca.
Do we have any other questions? I appreciate the comments in the chat. That's great.
Okay. So there are more comments, and I'm not looking at them. I'm here.
No, we're up to date with the comments in the chat.
Okay, Jenica, thank you so much. Uh-oh, my email bounced back.
We've taken care of that.
Oh, good. Thanks so much. All right. So again, you know, the care staff have a lot of insight into our residents. They're able to share wonderful stories with you, to share perceptions and whatnot. So I can't stress enough how much we realize we're all part of the circle of care. And working with a compassionate, educated, and appreciated care staff can be a tremendous bonus to your loved one's care, to your peace of mind and your experience. So recognize that that they do such a good job and have a huge responsibility.
We do have another question in the chat. So in regards to memory, or how would you handle someone asking the same question repeatedly in a conversation? How would you gently handle someone asking?
So I'd answer it. I'd answer it again the same way, and then I'd answer it with a question to them. And that's what we call redirecting, and trying to get them on perhaps a different subject and not, I'll give you an example of what not to do. Somebody's saying, when do I get to go home? When do I get to go home? You know, well, I'm sorry, we're not going home now. Want a cookie? You know, don't do that. It is, oh, tell me about your home. What do you like best about it? They talk about flowers. Have you seen the flowers in the waiting area? I can't wait till spring when our volunteers come and plant all the gardens. What did you grow? You know, things like that. Redirection. It's not squirrel. It's really got gentle's the key word, gently guiding them to another place of awareness. Sometimes it's physically moving them. If you're physically moving them in a wheelchair, let them know. Don't grab them from behind without telling them. They don't want to go down that car wash. Just put yourself in their place. Any other questions?
Not at this time, it doesn't look like.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope this has been helpful. Again, look to those resources, as I've mentioned. And, you know, if you're working within with people in care homes, talk with the staff there. Make sure your concerns go to people who have the ability to communicate it at a larger level. So, you know, the recreation coordinator, the patient care coordinator, the manager, the care staff is fantastic. They're the experts, but they don't always have the opportunity when they're so busy putting your loved one's care first as a first priority. They don't have the time to sit down and do the email. Actually, the other people are busy too, but it's a priority and it will happen.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
We appreciate your time to present and share your knowledge with us. On behalf of AVR Saskatchewan Board of Directors, I'd like to thank each of you for participating today.